Hello, I'm Emily Carver. Now, I've seen this, the recent revelation that an NHS trust has actually compared cousin marriages to white British women having children over the age of 34. Now, this is not just misguided, it's downright rude. This false equivalence between a cultural practice with very well-known genetic risks and a common demographic trend is a stark example of how political correctness can compromise public health messaging. So let's be clear about the facts. Well, there you go. This is GB News Originals. I'm Emily Carver. Please do give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And do leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Bradford NHS Trust's guidance, drawn up in 2022, only 2 years ago. And it describes cousin marriages as a cultural practice and likens it to a cultural practice of white women and couples starting families a little bit later due to liberal values such as preferring jobs, careers, bodily fitness, and individualism. Okay, well, this comparison is not only scientifically inaccurate, but also potentially harmful to public health. Now, a little bit earlier, I spoke to neurodiversity coach Fahima Mohammed, who suggested we should be just as worried about alcohol consumption and obesity as first cousin marriage.
I think there's a lot to compare in a way that genetically there's always issues around having children, and when it comes to genetics, whether it's first cousin or even getting married later. However, I think the ban is something that the government would not apply because that would be taken off the freedom of autonomy and it doesn't really address the issue of education as to why these things happen. And I think both sides needs to be clear that it's not just a Muslim and a cultural problem either. It's just the fact that people are changing those ways as well. And Muslims come from all different backgrounds. They don't all follow. I mean, Pakistani is not my particular background, and I would not follow that suit. And I've actually put a post out on that, educating on the fact that you do need to take more interest with regards to sort of marrying your cousins, and obviously the more DNA you have of each other, there is more risks. However, I do feel that if we are going to have a ban on something like that, then obviously there are more NHS problems when it comes to alcohol consumption, when it comes to obesity. So, making so many comparisons takes away that freedom. And there's so many people that don't like marriages, whether it comes to same sex, whether it comes to so many other rules, that in this country we have freedom to make those choices. I think it would be better to educate people on genetics, on biology, on certain things that is not suitable for their health, and it doesn't stigmatize and it doesn't make it sensitive. But just calling out one and talking in that way, that's why that comparison was made, because it was like as if to say every Muslim is actually, they're bound in this sort of day and age to still think in a backward term to marry their first cousins, which none in my family particularly does, and many other Muslims don't either. So That's the actual issue there with the comparison.
Well, of course, over-consuming alcohol is not good as a parent, nor is obesity. But is it really the same thing as first cousin marriage? The risks associated with these types of marriages are well documented, and they are significant. So, according to the Born in Bradford study, cousin marriage accounts for about 30% of birth defects in Bradford. This is not a minor increase in risk. It's a substantial public health concern that deserves serious attention. Marrying your cousin, particularly your first cousin, can significantly increase the risk of genetic disorders when you have children. A study published in Nature highlights that children born to genetically related parents face serious health risks, including cognitive difficulties, heart defects, and impaired hearing. This risk is not trivial. Research has shown that children born to first cousins have double the risk of congenital anomalies compared to the general population. This is not a kind thing. This is not good for children. This is something that needs to be spoken about and needs to be addressed. So, to equate this level of risk with that of women having children after the age of 34 is not just misleading, it's irresponsible. Okay, it's true that maternal age can of course impact pregnancy outcomes, but the risks are of a different nature and a different magnitude. It's also rather offensive, in my view.
The quiet crisis in Westminster. Who is really running Britain behind closed doors? Take a breath. settle in and stay informed, because what is currently unfolding inside the corridors of Westminster is a masterclass in political manoeuvrings that almost nobody is talking about openly. Welcome to Britain Underneath, the place where we pull back the heavy velvet curtains of British power and examine the raw machinery operating beneath the surface of the United Kingdom. Before we dive straight into the heart of today's revelation, do take a moment to subscribe to Britain Underneath and tap that notification bell. It truly helps this independent channel bring you the grounded, unflattering truths about British politics that the mainstream commentary so frequently glosses over. Now, let us dive straight into the core of the issue.
But human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan, he argued that it's pretty much fair enough to compare having children with your cousin to white women having a child over the age of 34.
I think if that's what they're saying, that, within some communities there are cousin marriages, that leads to poor health or disabilities or birth defects, as I think the term that they used. And the same is happening when people women over 34 are having children, and it's the same thing, and those children are not perfectly healthy either. And if their findings are that it's mostly white women.
But journalist Anna McGovern disagreed.
It is utterly insane. I have never seen something like this in my life, and it is deeply offensive to women as well. The fact that they're comparing marrying your first cousin to the same sort of bracket as a woman over the age of 34 having a child because of liberal values is completely insane. It is proven as well, it is well documented that there are huge, significant medical risks with first cousins having children. The fact that this was even debated in Parliament in the first place, and we also saw an independent MP as well, actually, in Parliament and, advocating for people to go against this and sort of saying, we should support this further. Honestly, I think this is deeply offensive to women, and I think this NHS trust should actually be analysed.
Well, the Bradford study found that 19% of babies born with birth defects had mothers over 34. Okay, so a little bit of a concern, but significantly lower than the 30% associated with cousin marriages. Moreover, the comparison ignores the fundamental difference between these two scenarios. Women choosing to have children later in life is a personal decision. Women tend to be supported through the health system, told and aware of any risk. Cousin marriages, on the other hand, are often rooted in cultural practices that may not fully consider the health implications for future generations. Now, the NHS Trust's attempt to draw parallels between these two situations smacks of, again, a misguided effort to avoid cultural sensitivities at the expense of clear public health messaging. This approach does a disservice to all communities by obscuring important health information that could inform better decision making. I'm also concerned about the cost of this, the cost of first cousin marriages, not only for those children who may live with conditions for the rest of their lives.
When you look at the political landscape today, you might be tempted to believe that power in Britain rests entirely where the constitutional textbooks tell us it rests, inside the House of Commons, guided by cabinet meetings and formal parliamentary votes. But if you hold that view, you are looking at a carefully constructed theatrical performance rather than the actual mechanism of governance. The truth is far more intriguing, considerably more complex, and distinctly uncomfortable for those who prefer simple explanations. In recent months, we have witnessed a fundamental shift in how executive decisions are calculated and executed. In recent months, we have witnessed a fundamental shift in how executive decisions are calculated and executed. Prime ministers and senior ministers enter office promising sweeping institutional reform, bold economic direction, and a decisive break from the chaos of recent history. Yet, within weeks of crossing that threshold into Downing Street, an unmistakable transformation occurs. The bold promises soften. The sharp policy edges are rounded off, and the government begins to operate on a setting of cautious management rather than decisive leadership.
Preventable genetic disorders. Now, the independent MP Iqbal Mohammed, elected on a pro-Palestine ticket, he actually stood up in the House of Commons to argue that first cousin marriage should not be banned in this country. He said it was seen as something that could help build family bonds and put families on a more secure financial foothold in some communities. He did admit there were health risks for children when it comes to such marriages, but he argued people should be allowed to marry their cousin regardless. Okay, that's nice. In our House of Commons, someone going into bat for first cousin marriage. This is not just about individual families, it's about the broader health resilience of entire communities. And this is not about stigmatizing communities. This is not about trying to be offensive. This is about how important it is that people understand the impacts of marrying your cousin, the impacts of having sex with your cousin that can lead to real harm for children down the line. It's crucial to approach this issue with sensitivity, yes, but not at the expense of clarity and public health. We can't just step on eggshells and hope this will go away. Now, the NHS Trust's comparison not only muddies the water on an important health issue, but also potentially discourages women from having children later in life by exaggerating the risk. These days, many women in this country are having children later on, and yes, there may well be some risks, but we check for these risks. We speak to doctors about these risks. We understand potential risks. It is not the same as marrying your cousin. Now, we need a more nuanced and honest conversation about the health implications of cousin marriages. This should include clear, evidence-based public health messaging, targeted education campaigns, and also, should it not be just banned in this country? It is 2024, for goodness sake. Now, the recent study suggesting a sharp decline in cousin marriages within Bradford's Pakistani community over the past decade is encouraging. It shows that with education and changing social dynamics, cultural practices can evolve. This is the kind of positive change we should be encouraging. We should not be obscuring this issue with these false equivalences. Anyway, in conclusion, the NHS Trust's guidance is a misguided attempt at some kind of cultural sensitivity, pitting different cultural practices against one another, and I believe it ultimately does more harm than good. It's time for a more honest, science-based approach to this issue. We owe it to all communities to provide clear, accurate health information, allow people to make informed decisions about their families and their future, and not defend these outdated practices that I believe have no place in Britain. Now, the health and well-being of future generations is at stake. We cannot afford to let political correctness compromise public health. It's time that the NHS, the government, society at large have an open, honest conversation about the risks of consanguineous marriages and to take concrete steps to address this significant public health concern. For goodness sake. I'm Emily Carver for GB News. Don't forget before you leave to like and subscribe to our channel. Keep liking those videos and subscribe to our channel.
Why does this happen with such predictable regularity across every political party that takes office? It is not merely a lack of political courage, though that certainly plays its part. Rather, it is because power in the United Kingdom is constrained by a deep network of permanent establishment structures that operate entirely outside the reach of the ballot box. From high-level civil service directorates and Treasury orthodoxy to civil action groups, powerful lobby networks and international diplomatic pressures, the real engine room of British policy is rarely subject to an election. Consider the ongoing debates over local council funding, constitutional reform, and national security commitments. On paper, ministers appear to be setting the direction of travel. But behind those polished press briefings, the actual parameters of what is deemed feasible are drawn up long before a minister even lays eyes on a policy submission. The civil service machine, acting under the quiet mandate of risk management, continuously gently steers elected officials away from radical action and towards establishment consensus. If you are enjoying this deep analysis, Please support the channel by subscribing to Britain Underneath right now. Every single subscription helps us produce more in-depth content that challenges standard narratives and brings clarity to complex political events. This brings us to a crucial question that every citizen ought to ponder. If the boundaries of what a government can do are predetermined by non-elected structures, how much control do voters actually exercise during a general election? We are told that our parliamentary democracy is built on direct accountability, yet the policy overlap between competing parties continues to grow closer by the year. The names on the office doors change, the party badges are swapped out, but the fundamental direction of the state remains remarkably uniform. This is not a conspiracy. It is simply the natural behaviour of an institutional system designed, above all else, to preserve itself. When a government attempts to step outside the accepted boundary, whether on taxation, legal reform, or constitutional changes, the system responds swiftly. We see subtle leaks to the press, sudden market warnings, and quiet resistance from within Whitehall itself until the administration falls back in line. Take a breath, step back, and look at the broader picture. This subtle push and pull between elected leaders and the permanent state is the defining battle of modern British governance. It determines how your tax money is spent, how local communities are managed, and what kind of country we are building for the next generation. Understanding this dynamic is not just an intellectual exercise, it is essential if we want to hold power genuinely accountable. If you value sharp, mature, and unapologetic political insights, please subscribe to Britain Underneath today. Your support helps ensure this channel keeps growing and delivering the clear-eyed analysis you deserve. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to return for our next deep dive into the hidden forces shaping the United Kingdom.